Welcome, everyone, to the True Stories in Tech podcast, life-changing conversations in the areas of technology, business, and belonging. My name is Brian E. Numa. Our company is Strategic Systems Group. We are a Los Angeles-based IT consulting firm and experts in enterprise resource planning. I'm here today with my friends and cohorts, Manish Bardia, President of Think AI Consulting, Eddie Bader, COO of Aegis Innovators, and Mr. Eric Klaus, CEO of Partner Source Solutions. And our very special guest today is Michael Daoud. He is the CEO of Visus, LLC. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Brian.
We normally start off with something fairly easy. Maybe tell us something about Michael Daoud.
Sure. Let's see here. I'm originally from Lebanon and lived around the world, not out of fun, but because of the war. We had to leave a few times when things were coming close to the house. And I attended 5 schools by the age of 13 and had the opportunity in Lebanon to learn French, English, and Arabic from the first grade, which ended up helping me as we bounced around the world. So it's as hard as it was back then, it's been helpful in business. But we landed in the U.S. in Orange County, Fountain Valley in 1981. Attended high school there. And then 3 years later, moved up to Santa Barbara and had to make friends all over again, which I was getting used to throughout my childhood. So it's been a great journey. In fact, as hard as it was during the time of all these moves, but learned a lot and kind of built character and really helped me out in business a lot. What more can I tell you? I started programming when I was 13, when I landed in 81. I went to Los Amigos High School in Fountain Valley. And I think they had 5 TRS-80s, a couple of Commodores, and an Apple IIe or something. And I just fell in love. I was always a kid playing with technology as a kid growing up, more on the hardware side, building kits like a radio station and stuff like that. But fell in love with computing and continued down that path through college and afterwards. So would it be helpful to tell a little more where I went to school, UCSB, things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I studied electrical and computer engineering at UC Santa Barbara. And so I did both hardware and software, and I kind of, gravitated back to software, which is where I started when I was 13. And then I did a business program at UCLA Anderson School of Management, which was awesome. And then right after UC Santa Barbara, I worked in automotive electronics at Delco and all the future cars that GM was putting out. So that was a lot of fun. Did 4.5 years of that. And then got a chance to program the power steering mechanism for GM's first EV in 1993. GM was in the electric vehicle business back then. And I got to program drive-by-wire way back then, which was a lot of fun. So.
Wow, it's an amazing story. Sometimes we date ourselves by recounting our first experiences with computers. So I think I might have you beat. My first programming experience was at UCLA, a Fortran 10 course in which I had written programs in Fortran for an IBM 360 using punch cards. So I don't know that very many people have had experiences that go back that far. And then I guess my next experience was on an Apple II computer. Nice. Before the Apple IIe. So what was the first bit of software you wrote when you were first working with computers?
Oh gosh, I remember writing a battleship program on a TRS-80. I literally can visualize it right now in my head, sitting in high school after hours programming that game. And it was one of those things where I was trying to teach myself programming, and is partly from a magazine, and then you get to modify things on your own to make it better, and it's pretty cool to bring things to life on a screen.
That is cool. In my case, I remember writing some programs in Fortran for that IBM 360 that would print like "Happy Birthday" somebody. So I would end up printing these happy birthday signs on the blue bar paper that would come out of the printer. And then there was one one time where the TA pulled off my report and then kind of held it up and say, "Who is burning the machine unit seconds?" So I got I got a little bit of a scolding. And I guess not major, but next interesting. I was into blackjack, so I wrote a blackjack program. It was a blackjack training program essentially for the Apple II computer.
That's great.
All right, so how would you compare and contrast the places where you've lived, Lebanon, Orange County, Santa Barbara?
Oh, you know, they're all different, unique in their own ways. And part of the travel during the war, we lived in Greece, we lived in France, we lived in Egypt. And so each one was quite different. But I think for me, the common thread between them all is that I learned and that allowed me to adapt quickly is respecting the local culture. Always allowed me to be welcomed with open arms. I think people liked it when somebody from the outside was trying hard to, you know, be part of their culture, speak their language, and so if I were to compare and contrast, I think, yeah, each place has its unique cultural traditions, languages, but at the end of the day, I think what I've learned from all that is people are people, and more importantly, is to keep an open mind that people from different places think differently, and so that's allowed me to, or been a big help for me in business, that it wasn't just my way or the highway. I could listen to somebody else's perspective, which has value just as much as mine.
Cool. And then you mentioned going to UCSB, and then you also mentioned AGSM. So did you attend both?
Yes. So I did UCSB, electrical and computer engineering, got out, worked at Delco. And then after I started Visus, I was really interested in learning business. In fact, even when I was at UCSB, but they didn't have an MBA program up here. So I decided to start Visus after Delco. And I can tell you a little story about that if you need, if you'd like to know. And UCLA had this awesome program called Management Development for Entrepreneurs for people who had started their companies already. And so I applied, got accepted, and it was just wonderful to have rock star professors teaching our classes, and then met a lot of good people in them too.
Cool. About what year did you finish at UCLA?
2004.
2004. Cool. Good. Well, you mentioned Visus, LLC, so maybe we go there. So what led you to start a business?
Yes, great question. So I worked at Delco Electronics in Santa Barbara, which is at the time when I joined, it was 1989, was about 2,500 people. 2,400 military, about 100 automotive. And Delco corporate for automotive was in Indiana, Kokomo, Indiana. And so our team out here of 100 people was really, you know, tasked with doing some special projects and really small focus groups. We were able to do a lot of things. So we worked on the original nav that you see in cars today. I've got adaptive cruise control in my car today. We were working that back then in 1994 and testing it out on the freeway way back then. Real-time damping, airbags, all that. Well, about 4.5 years into my career at Delco, Delco decided to sell off the military side. And as a result, they wanted to fold the automotive department here and move back to either Detroit or Indiana. And because I had moved so much in my childhood, I just wanted stability. It's kind of the reverse of what people do, which is after college, they bounce around. I didn't want to bounce around anymore. So I decided to stay in Santa Barbara and figured, hey, there's a bunch of tech companies. Let me go apply there. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a job. And the reason being was we use the 6800 model processors of Motorola for all the car computers because they were low power and inexpensive. And most other tech companies here in town that were doing like imaging and stuff like that were using the 68,000 processor. of Motorola. And so when I go to interview, they're like, well, somebody else knows 68,000, so we're going to hire him or her over you. And after a couple of rounds of that, I said, you know what? I graduated with honors from engineering. That didn't come easy. I know I can do this, but just because what I realized back then is I wasn't marketable because my skill set was so unique to a processor that somebody else wasn't using. And in fact, that was a blessing in disguise because I did a lot of reflection and said, you know, I think I'm better than this. And I could do something. And it pushed me to start Visus. And my dad had a friend that was a consultant, and he asked him, you know, if he had anything that perhaps I can help with. And he was writing all kinds of databases, and he was overloaded at the time and said, here's a laptop, here's a database. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember the name. Somebody asked me the other day, but nonetheless, it was a DOS-based database, super fast. And it was for a mail order catalog company. And he goes, this thing needs to be upgraded. Here's a laptop, go figure it out. I went down to Barnes & Noble, we had it in town. I could not find one book on database programming. This is 1993. I called the manufacturer. They sent me the manuals. I read through them. I figured it out and upgraded the thing and optimized it. And just to get it, back then, this was a mail order company, so all orders are on 800 number. So the faster they can bring up records, the quicker they can get off the call, the cheaper the cost was to take the order because they're paying for all that time. So that was my stint into it, and I loved it. And it kind of took me back to my programming, early programming when I first discovered TRS-80. I'm like, this is what I love to do. So I started consulting on my own, doing both programming and IT. There wasn't enough programming jobs. This is right when the internet was starting in '94. And basically that was the beginning of Visus. So don't be disappointed when some doors don't open, because there might be some better doors waiting for you.
That's really good advice.
Michael, what does Visus do today?
Okay, so we are focused on digital transformations. We call ourselves a digital transformation company. And there's two parts of that we really like to help our customers with. It's improving operational efficiency and enhancing customer experience. And we have three service lines. We have a web service line, a mobile service line, and a data service line. And we apply all three for solutions that we create for our customers. So sometimes it's product integration on the back end or with a front end. So people have different systems that don't talk to each other. We'll integrate them with APIs. And a lot of times we have an interface, if it's web or mobile based, to either push in data to those systems or pull data out. So we built a lot of great systems over the years. And part of our web team now, we have they do content management systems as well. So for mid-level enterprise, like corporate websites. So we're a big partner with a company called Sitefinity. So we implement their solutions, along with being a Microsoft partner too.
From the Visus LLC perspective, is there a particular vertical that you focus on?
Great question, Brian. So we've done a lot of work in healthcare, in gaming. We're trying to do more in financial services as well. But in general, we've really been able to serve companies across the board, including higher ed. We've done a lot of projects for the UC system, for government, county of Santa Barbara, quite a bit of work. We've been working with the county for over 20 years. But generally, it seems to be, at least on the private sector, companies between 20 million to 2 billion in revenue are typically those that we're able to help. When they're really small, they usually don't have the resources or the skill set in-house to get some things done. So we're able to help on that level. And then on the mid-level of 500-600 million in revenue, they're usually on a growth path of growth. And even if they have an internal team, they usually don't have the bandwidth to get things done. And those are usually good customers for us as well. And they're trying to integrate or even build some systems because they're not at the stage to bring on like a big SAP or Oracle system yet. And so they find that they become much more operationally efficient by building the systems that they need or integrating them properly.
You have been traveling a lot also, and you have a story about some product development while you were traveling. Tell us a little bit about your travel and how did you come about the product?
Oh, are you referring to the selfie stick? Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah, just I love traveling, as you know, it's part of my growing up. Traveled so much, it's something I really enjoy doing. So my wife and I love to travel the world, explore new places, and we're big foodies, so we're always looking to the right restaurants when we go places. And you know, during one of our trips back to Europe with the family, it was in 2004. We were in Paris, and we're in front of the Louvre, and we're trying to get a picture of ourselves. So I kept extending my arm, and I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm over 6 feet and got long arms, and we're trying to get a good picture of ourselves with the Louvre behind us. And for the life of me, I couldn't get a good picture of us. It was our heads filling the entire frame. This is pre-smartphone, right? So you got to remember, it was like a compact digital camera and holding the button on it, right? Because iPhone didn't come out till 2007.
Right.
And so my frustration of taking picture after picture, I said, I wish my arm was longer. And I'm like, well, what if I had this camera on a stick 3 feet out? So I came home and called a friend of mine who was a mechanical engineer and say, hey, John, what do you think? We should try and build one of these things. So we just went to the camera store, grabbed tripods, cut them up, put cameras on the end to try and test the idea, see if it works. And actually, because the whole idea of coming up with something was to get the background in the frame, not our faces, not just our faces. So yeah, one thing led to another. We designed a selfie stick called the X-Shot and ended up being in 26 countries. We were on CNN International. We were on ABC, or Good Morning America. You know, Best Father's Day Gifts. We got to be on CNN Domestic. Got a lot of press. We're in all the REI stores nationwide. It was a blast. We ran it for about, gosh, I want to say 7 or 8 years, and then we sold it off, and it was a fun ride. What I learned from that, Manish, is I love software, because when you got a bug, you could just patch it and roll it out. When you have a bug with a physical good, you got to send it back and have it reworked, and no, it's a lot of time delay.
Oh, wow.
So I learned I really want to build software.
Yeah, we never think that. Now that you're mentioning, I'm like, that is a problem because bugs are always there. There are improvements. So in this, you're kind of stuck, right? Like you need to get rid of the old inventory, look for new version, and that takes time.
Yeah, and when it takes 60 to 90 days from the time you place an order until it comes across the ocean, and part of the batch doesn't work, you can't sell that. You got to place a new order or have enough coming over, and it's like, oh, and I thought that was a simple idea that wouldn't have a lot of problems. I have so much respect for people that build anything physical these days, including my car that I get into every day, because you don't realize how complex it is and how hard it is to make it run without any headaches, right?
Yeah.
Any problems. So yeah, I love stuff.
Interesting. So that is one learning. Tell us something else you learned from that experience.
What I learned from that experience as well, having run a professional services company versus a consumer goods product. When you run a product, you're like, oh, it's just a product. I'm going to sell it. It's going to be a lot easier, because professional services is a lot about relationships, right? And knowing people. I learned that to be exactly true for product too, right? We had to sell to REI. We sold to B&H Photo, Adorama, all those big places. There's people behind each one of those logos and companies, and you had to also build relationships with them. You didn't just show up and say, the product did not just sell itself, is what I'm getting at, right? You had to build relationships and take care of people as you would in a professional services firm. So at the end of the day, relationships are really key, I believe, in any business.
Excellent.
Michael, I'm curious. You talked about, your early years and moving around quite a bit. Um, landing as a teenager in Orange County, that had to be a very different life at that point. Especially, a teenage boy landing in Orange County in the early 80s. And I can say that because I was a teenage boy in Orange County in the early 80s. In fact, it was funny. You mentioned the high school. I was going to ask if you went to Fountain Valley High. And the reason is because my mom worked at Fountain Valley High
Oh, wow.
at that point in time. So just was curious, but she worked in the special ed department at Fountain Valley High. But what was that? What was that like for a kid coming from your background, and then all of a sudden here you are in Fountain Valley. You've got Huntington Beach just a few miles down the road. What was that experience like?
It was very hard. It took me almost 3 years to make friends, which is why I almost lost it when my dad walked in and said, "I got a job in Santa Barbara. We're moving." I'm like, "I just made friends. You're gonna move my senior year."
Wow.
So the school that I went to in Lebanon, early days, it was nuns, and then after I think the 4th or 5th grade, it was Scottish monks that taught us. So I had a pretty thick British accent when I came here because they were really big on reading out loud in class and making sure you pronounce things properly. That was a gift that my parents sent me to that school. So my dad had a French education growing up. My mom had an English education growing up. So the compromise was to find a school that taught both languages. And that was a blessing in disguise because that helped me when I moved to France to go to school and then come here. So first of all, having that accent was interesting because in PE, we played tennis and the kids wanted to hear the score over and over. And finally, I'm like, why do they want to hear the score over and over? Okay, got it. They like to hear 30-40 or whatever. I lost that accent now. So assimilating and getting embedded in the culture took some time. And the one saving grace that I had in that is because my French was so strong and learned it from such a young age, I ended up joining the advanced French classes for juniors and seniors as a freshman. And so at that point in life, the juniors and seniors embraced me more than the freshmen in my other classes because here I was better at French than they were. But I think at their phase in life in high school, they were, more, whatever it was, they were, they embraced me a lot easier. And so that was super helpful. But it was definitely not an easy time, not knowing anybody and showing up, trying to make friends. And just if you're a freshman in the States, it's already hard to, when you're entering. So, made it through, made some good friends from that French class that took care of me and hung around with them. And then when I came to Santa Barbara, I was dreading it because it took me so long to make friends in Orange County. But I met a great group of guys that we're still friends with today and have lunch together once every week or two, still. So, and I'd be in the best year of my life in school, even though I was dreading it when we moved up here.
So what was, now Santa Barbara, and you're still a young man at that point in time. You've got a little bit of California experience under your belt by this point. Do you become the Santa Barbara surfer guy, or what happens at this point?
Oh, good question. So I only had 1 year in high school, so I really just kind of adapted with this group of friends and going to football games and, widening that circle of friends. But it was only 1 year. And then I went to UCSB for electrical engineering. And, at that time, my parents were like, okay, you're going there. There's no need for you to go anywhere else or for us to pay you. I mean, my parents sacrificed a lot just to get us out of the mess that was back home, right? And so, I respected that. So I lived at home and all that. And then there was no time to surf. As an electrical and computer engineering degree major, it was life in classes and afterwards in the library. And, I was always driven since I was a kid to do well in school. You know, is that due to me or my parents? Probably a little bit of both. So, and that major really required a lot of focus. So, you know, I ended up having a nice, good group of friends that I'm still friends with today, and that was experience and went to work. So, yeah.
Sounds like you were a good student. Were you an A student? Were you always an A student? If so?
Yeah, I was always very competitive since I was a kid in terms of, at least, you know, I would always go to the boards in Lebanon in our school, St. Joseph School, and say, okay, am I 1, 2, or 3 this time?
All right.
Class, so yeah.
So you have that competitive drive.
Yes, you could say, yeah. And I think for me, it was just a challenge. I think my parents had certain expectations, but I also kind of got is part of my fabric. I like to do well at what I do, and yeah. So,
do you have brothers or sisters?
I have 2 sisters. Yes.
Okay. Are you where are you in the 3? Are you 1, 2, or 3?
I'm number 1. Yes.
So you're the oldest.
I am the oldest. Yes. So I've got my second sister. She's a photographer, artist, does amazing stuff, and then my youngest sister is a doctor. Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like the entire family had some drive to it there to be excellent.
Yes, I guess you could say that. Yeah. So, and you know, in a way that was helpful, bouncing around. At least it gave me some kind of identity of doing something that I can recognize, because saying, okay, yeah, I'm here. I'm in a new place. I don't have a lot of friends, but I know how to learn how to not push myself, but how to address things and learn and do well, right? So that was helpful for me, at least from an identity point of view.
So now,
and then I went to UCSB, even though
Yeah.
I graduated with honors. Although I was, top of class all throughout, all of a sudden, all the people that came to the electrical and computer engineering program at UCSB were all top of their class too. So I had to work my butt off.
Sure. Yeah.
Wait a second. It's not as easy as it used to be.
The level went up.
Oh yeah, but it was good. It was good. Made my level go up as well.
Good, Manish.
Yeah. So Michael, you mentioned while moving places, it makes you appreciate the culture or the difference in opinion.
Sure.
Touch a little bit on that, and also I want to talk on the how did you come to collaborate with teams in Brazil and Argentina? So I want to understand both, and I'm asking the question about moving because travel thing relates to me a lot, because I was in India, and India has around 27 states, and my parents always took me in the summer some other state. And even though India feels like one language, each state has its own language. And when we go, we cannot understand. I mean, like people, English is not common, and even Hindi, which is the northern population who speak, what they speak, other state will not speak. So even though within India, I could feel there is a lot of difference. But I also realized when I was going to my college time, I was at ease going to new place. That okay, it's a new place, but we have traveled a lot. It's not a big deal, but not everybody does that. So give us some perspective, a little bit on that, and then how did you come to work on with a team in Brazil?
Sure. So I think I learned at a young age when I was able to speak the local language. It allowed me to connect better with people. They saw that I was trying. So when I went to France to grade school, we lived in Paris for 2 years. It was easy for me to adapt and make friends at that age because I spoke French already and knew it. And so it's like, oh, wow, there's a kid from the outside who speaks our language. Let's bring him in. And then when we lived in Greece, in Athens, I remember having to go get bread for my mom from the bakery. And, we're there only for 3 months. But during that time, I learned basics of, please, thank you, the word for bread. And people react well because I'm trying. I wasn't
Mhm.
trying to say, well, you need to understand me because I don't speak your language. No, I'm going to try and speak your language.
Yeah.
And that was, left a big impression on me of just trying, and then people appreciate it a lot more. And I think that's something I just carried with me anywhere I go in the world, is to learn what the local cultural traditions are and some key words that would help connect with people. So that's helped me tremendously. And so my wife is from Brazil. We met here in Santa Barbara when she was studying English, but when I went back to visit her family, it was the same thing for me. I learned a few basic words because some family members did not speak any English. And I tried really hard. I thought it would be easy to speak Portuguese because I speak French. And it ended up being much more difficult because, for me, Portuguese, think of it as a superset of the Latin language. So if you look at the foundation of Portuguese, there's a guy online who studies languages, and I watched one on Portuguese. Portuguese is based on vulgar Latin, is what he said, meaning it's not the classical Latin. And so what you have is the use of the root words that are common in Romance or Latin languages, but they also have on the periphery more words. So, for example, my wife will understand Spanish and speak Spanish, but a person speaking Spanish will have a more difficult time understanding Portuguese because of all these extra words that they have. So in any case, it was a lot harder for me to learn that language, Portuguese, to converse, but I tried really hard, and that was really helpful to connect with the family. It made it easier. And then just over time, our goal was to always try and have an office in Brazil and work with people in Brazil. And so we took the step of partnering with a whole team down there. And so that's how all that happened.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So a little background on the word Visus. When I started Visus, so when I was working at Delco, one of my hobbies was graphics design. And so I would take classes in Illustrator, Photoshop, and things like that. And so I'd love to do logos, and and I really just enjoyed graphics design as a hobby. So when I started Visus, I said, I wanted it to be like the word stands for vision, and I really had usually any project I worked on, if it was programming or graphics design, I'd have that vision in my head and kind of go execute it. And so Visus in Latin is vision, and so that's I still use it to today, and I think that's what makes us a little different out in the marketplace, is that we're not just we don't look at things just from a programmer's point of view, but also a user's point of view. So it fuses the elements of not just programming, but a great user experience and user interface. And I think that comes from my passion for design and programming together. Yeah.
Michael, you've been an entrepreneur for quite a while now.
Yes.
I'm curious, where did that come from? I mean, you talked about, the beginning, but just the idea of going out and starting your own business in and of itself, for some people that's daunting, and for other people it seems like it's almost a natural extension of who they are. So I'm curious where that fits for you.
It's a great question, Eric. So as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be an inventor when I was a kid. So I'd come up with all kinds of crazy ideas. Hey, Dad, what do you think about this? Oh, yeah, that's okay, but somebody else is doing that already. Always thinking about how to come up with something that improves people's lives. I remember being in the car in Lebanon and telling them, wouldn't it be cool to have something that would alert you? This is in the 70s. That if your car got stolen, you have something on your keychain that would beep or something like that, that your car is moving from where it's supposed to be. He's like, oh yeah, but how are you going to do that and stuff so my brain was always on inventing, and I think being an entrepreneur allows you to be able to invent and be creative. In fact, I just started listening to a book called Unbound about Jeff Bezos, and in the book they describe Jeff Bezos as the Uber product manager. He was the one driving like Alexa and making it because his team would say, oh, that sounds like Star Trek. What do you want a device to do for you, like the Amazon Echo? And he was there. It was fun for him to invent and reinvent and keep improving things. And I think as an entrepreneur, it gives you that liberty and that opportunity. And I think in our business, one of the things that I enjoy the most about software and all the solutions that we do for companies is that innovation component, right? Of what's the best way to, and so you're inventing on a micro level for a specific problem. But it's very satisfying too, because then when you come up with a great solution, people appreciate it. And I think, to become an entrepreneur, did I have it in me? I had dreams about it. But I think if I hadn't lost my job, I was used to that paycheck when I was at GM. And in a way, that was the blessing in disguise, is when it went away and nobody else saw the fire that I had in me. They were looking at my 60 HC11 experience instead of. So I'm like, it was not an easy decision, but I'm really glad that I did it.
So being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, running your own business, inevitably there are parts of it, right, that we like. There are parts of it that maybe we don't like. I'm curious. I always love to ask this question. What's the part that you like, and what's the part that you don't like about running your own business?
Yeah. So that changes over time as an entrepreneur. But initially, so my dad was in finance. He was a CFO, and I'd see him working day and night on financial numbers, and he worked on some pretty big projects. And I said, oh, I never want to do that. Now, for engineering, you have to be pretty good at math, and finance is math as well. But it was something about that topic that I didn't. Maybe it's just because I saw him work so hard at it and spend so many hours. I don't know what it was, but that was something which is an important part in a business, is a financial aspect of it. But I don't enjoy doing that personally, for me, kind of to do the books and do the financial statements. So, thankfully, a few years ago, I think going maybe 9 or 10 years ago, we found a CFO to come on board to help us with our stuff. And that's his shtick, because he'll look at a P&L statement, balance sheet, whatever, and things just talk to him, right? And for me, it's like when I'm reviewing a software application, the things that pop out at my eyes from the user experience and user interface, it's just like the back of my hand. I don't have to work hard at it. And that was the same for him. And I said, great, Paul is helping us with this. I'm glad he's there. I have an understanding of what our numbers are, how things are moving, but I don't have the patience for the details of going through that. And so that's a part that if I had to do it, I'd have to do it, but I don't enjoy it. And I think over time, and I'm really good at operations and setting standards and things like that. But I've realized here, like in the past year or so, how much I enjoy sales and marketing, and partly because we've never done a lot of marketing. Everything's been through word of mouth and relationships and networking. And as we try to grow and connect with more companies, marketing is an important aspect. And when you come from a pretty difficult and abstract background studying electrical and computer engineering, a lot of abstract concepts, you're like, well, what's marketing? It's just a bunch of words and images and messages. Well, when you get to do it, you realize how hard it is, and you have a whole other level of respect for that. And for me, it's a challenge right now to kind of break the code on marketing for Visus and sales. And so, with time, I'm hoping to be able to shift more and more towards that, because I think as the founder and CEO of the company, I probably have the most input on the direction and strategy for that, because I've worked with marketing people and they always want to know your vision, where you're going. And for me to spend more time on that would help them, and being able to attain the goals that we're going after.
Follow-up question to Eric's question on the entrepreneurship. Michael, tell me also your before and after MBA understanding. I always ask MBA question.
Yeah. So just to be clear, the program I did at Anderson was a graduate certificate program called an MDE. So it's not a full MBA.
Okay.
But you basically, it's like a quote unquote, like a compact MBA for entrepreneurs, if you want to call it that. But it is a Yeah, formal program called Management Development for Entrepreneurs. What I loved about it, like anything else, and I'm sure you guys are in peer groups or other business groups, whenever you get in a room with other people that are faced with the same challenges, you're like, oh, I'm not the only guy in the world dealing with this. There's super helpful. And so when I was in that room with other entrepreneurs and founders, it was wonderful to see that, okay, it's not just me. This is a common problem everybody's dealing with. But I think what it did for me is it expanded my mind in looking at things from a bigger picture of business. And like I said, they had the rockstar faculty teaching these classes, and it was just awesome to see. And the other part that was kind of cool for me is I think at least one, but I think it was two of the professors that taught the different classes were electrical and computer engineering grads that got into business. I'm like, all right, there's hope. So it's kind of cool.
I think your point about knowing that others are also in the same boat is very liberating, and it puts you at ease. Otherwise, it's like, I'm the only one who doesn't know. And that is very stressful, that I'm in a unique situation and there is no help. So
yeah, I just joined a peer group about a month and a half ago. All professional services founders and CEOs, and just awesome. They're from different industries.
Yeah.
But you get to hear the stories of what they're trying to do and all that. Like, okay, this is great. I can share something with you. You could share something with me. Help each other kind of move down the path. So, yeah.
I was waiting for Eric to jump in about IACP.
Absolutely.
I think Eric's on mute.
I can always do IACP, but do you have a question, Brian?
No, I was thinking that would be a logical transition, since you talked about peer groups and so forth, that maybe IACP would be a good topic.
Then let's dive into that. Sure. So I think I have a pretty good recollection of this, but Michael, when did you first hear about IACP, and how did you first hear about IACP?
Great question. So I attended the Microsoft Partner Conference in LA, and I don't know what year that was, if it was 2004, 5, mid 2000s, whatever it was in LA, in that July timeframe. That's when I was first exposed to IACP, and there was someone that stopped me and said, hey, we have this organization, you should join. And, I live in Santa Barbara, and I'm trying to recall, just something didn't work where I couldn't attend. So it kind of went to the back of my mind. And then as we were trying to grow and expand, it kind of came back on my radar. And as you guys know, we don't have a chapter in Santa Barbara. The closest one is North LA, and then there's SoCal in Orange County. So I decided to start attending, and I realized, oh my gosh, I wish I attended 10 years ago. I probably would have met you, Eric, and Ro, when you guys were presidents and running the show. And but it is what it is. It's a long drive to go there, but it's been an awesome community, so welcoming, and really a great group of people. So I've really enjoyed being a part of it, and I'm hoping to be able to nurture some of the relationships, because I think there's a lot of good partnerships that can happen. One of the things that we do, I think, complements a lot of the things that people do in IACP. So a lot of Dynamics partners, IT partners, and we come in more on the software side to product integration, building portals, building, and so they're on the front lines hearing about that stuff. So I'm hoping that there could be some good relationships there that could lead to some wonderful partnerships. But I think it's an awesome organization. You guys are a part of it. You do an amazing job at running it. And I've really enjoyed it. And I think, for me, the proof was I was the guy that drove 3 hours each way to attend a 3-hour meeting. So I was on the road for 6 hours for a 3-hour meeting, but that's how worth it was. I miss those days because I used to listen to some audiobooks. Now I've got a 10-minute commute, so it's not much time to listen to an audiobook.
Okay, so book. I have few questions because Eddie's not there. I'm gonna play Eddie.
Okay.
So rapid fire round, 4 questions. Favorite book?
Favorite book? Wow, so many I've read. I'm in a history book club, I think, and so we read a history book every month.
Wow.
So when I think about favorite book, I think about the book called Empires of the Sea, which was a battle between Spain and the Ottoman Empire, and just a great read. Another one called The Mayflower about the Pilgrims coming over. Great books there. On the business side of books, I'd have to open up probably my Kindle app and tell you. I've read so many really good books.
Sure.
I should have prepared for this question before. I'm currently reading a book called Scale or Fail, which is really interesting. It's kind of a binary message. You either scale or you fail. So,
wow.
Really, really good book. I'm enjoying. A really good friend of mine has written a few books. One of them is called Make Elephants Fly. It's about building a startup and growing it. So that's been excellent. Looking at my books here right now. What else is there? Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind. Let me just go back to the older part of my list.
No, that's good. I think
Yeah.
we are good. Next
Okay.
is favorite quote.
Favorite quote. Well, so my favorite quote is one that we use in our company for our philosophy. And it talks about the approach to really building successful products, right? But it's an Abe Lincoln quote. And it says, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will use the first 4 to sharpen the axe." What I've learned over time, at least in the software industry, development industry, is that a lot of people don't take the time to sharpen the axe. What does that mean? They don't take the time to create specs, to create wireframes, to write down what the business logic is. They jump right at the keyboard to start building a product. If you're prototyping and you're in a lab, go for it. But you're building a product that you're going to maintain that needs to be robust and reliable and scalable. If you don't do any planning, you're just setting yourselves up for a surprise. And for me, the analogy that I give people that haven't done software development is, if you want to build a home, would you go straight to a contractor and say, "I want a 5-bedroom house with 4 bathrooms and 2-car garage and a pool," and walk away and have them build it? You probably have a catastrophe on your hands, because that home could be interpreted in a million different ways. And you'd have no clue. The right way to build a house is to have a set of blueprints and maybe some renderings where all the details are worked out, and then you go build from that, because when you build from that, you have something that, a reference of a standard and criteria to build the house from, so you don't have a surprise. And for me, that quote really embraces that idea of, if you invest a little bit up front for a solution design and architecture, it really allows you to have almost a straight line to the finish line when you go to build, including predictability on time and budget. So that's my favorite quote.
Favorite food?
Oh, favorite food. My entire family enjoys Thai food.
Ooh.
Love Thai cuisine. Second to that is Indian. I cook Indian food at home because I like to cook when I get a chance. It's like therapy.
We have to make a trip to Santa Barbara now.
Yeah, I make a mean vindaloo.
Wow. Okay, cool. Excellent. Final question. Favorite way to spend a holiday or your off day?
So off day, being able to relax with the family, enjoying, the region here is great. But I think what we've learned, not only from this region, but also a couple of months ago, we went to Hawaii, and not having traveled for a year and a half, we're like, we just want to sit at the beach for 6 days and then do something else. What we all realized, not just me, that after day number 2, when day number 3 rolled around, we wanted to get moving and explore. So when we travel, we really like to explore on our feet and, explore a city, explore trails, nature, all that, and coupling that with good food, that for us is a great holiday.
Explore and food. Wow.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Michael.
My pleasure.
Michael, you talked about reading a few minutes ago, and it sounds like you're a pretty voracious reader. I'm just curious, though, and again, tying this back to, running your own business, do you dedicate time for that, or how do you fit that into your day?
Great question, Eric. So I'll start it by saying I'm not a fast reader. My brain was all about math and analytics growing up, and so it took me longer to read. I love to read, and so because I'm not a fast reader, my aim has always been to carve out time to read. But unfortunately, running a business takes quite a bit of time, and so I find myself the only opportunities I have to read is either early in the morning when I wake up, when it's quiet, or late at night before I go to bed. But I supplement that, and typically what I end up doing is when I get a book, I also get the audiobook version. And so if I'm working out or if I'm driving 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here, I'm able to continue to consume that book either, by listening to it or by reading it at the beginning of the day or end of the day.
Michael, you mentioned your wife. Do you also have children?
Yes, I have 2 kids. One girl, Stella, who's in high school. She's a sophomore, and my son, Mateo, who's in 7th grade. I'm growing way too fast, and that's the other part of being an entrepreneur. It's like, wait a second, how do I slow things down so I could spend more time with them?
Yeah.
It's always a challenge, but try to dedicate as much of the weekends as possible with them, since during the week, it's just with their schedule and my schedule, usually it doesn't provide a lot of time during the week, but the weekends are focused on family.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So I think that this question might be appropriate. We have a young woman on our team. She's all of 17 years old. She helps us with graphics and video editing and the like. So if I'm doing the math correctly, she is roughly the same age as your daughter.
2 years older, yes. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so one of the questions that I will often ask kind of go along the lines of, I guess there are two lines of questioning. One of them is along the lines of entrepreneurship. So so one of the choices she has to make is about whether to go to school or to maybe jump into work. What would you suggest to her?
Great question. So when I applied to the electrical and computer engineering program at UC Santa Barbara, it was a hunch that I had that I'd worked with hardware as a kid, but also done some software. But at that time, I couldn't see myself sitting down at a computer 8 hours a day typing. So I'm like, oh, I got to be in a lab. I got to do something with my hands. So I studied. So I picked that program, which did both hardware and software. But I found out towards the end of my 3rd year that I didn't enjoy the hardware side as much, but I was invested 3/4 of the way through. And so I finished, and I still ended up, as I said, I finished doing well in that program. But my hunch was right, because when I got into the workplace, I realized it wasn't for me, the hardware side of things, which then I propagated back if you remember, I said I did a lot of programming for the GM's electric vehicle, the first EV in 1993. I found my passion for software. When I look back at that, and there was, I think, cultural pressures about, my parents were immigrants here and trying to say, right before year 4 in college, hey, I want to change tracks, go somewhere else. Didn't seem like it was something that I could put on the table. And the lesson that I learned from there that I tell my kids today and I told my wife I would tell my kids this, is it's okay to take a year off after high school and work in the area that you think you want to study, to verify that it's the right environment, the right stimulation, passion that you have. And that'll give you even more energy when you study it. But to go straight from high school to the program and come out and say, well, that wasn't really for me, you're like, oh man, I wish I could do it all over again. But that's a big investment. So if there's, for me, it's like, there's nothing wrong with taking a year off and working in that area that you want to. And I think that could make a stronger case when you actually apply, is I paused to confirm that this is what I want to do. And this is why I'm applying for this.
Wow, that's a really good answer. Another question that we kind of go back and forth with in entrepreneurship is whether to work for somebody or to be an entrepreneur at the outset. So what would you suggest? I
think there's a lot to be learned when you work from somebody, right? And you actually read a lot about entrepreneurs that got their start by working for a master entrepreneur, and they're their right-hand person and close to them, right? So I think there's a lot of value there that can provide a lot of shortcuts. When I decided to go off on my own, nobody in my family was an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what an invoice looked like and how you create one. And so it was a long road. But I think working for somebody else as an entrepreneur, it might be a great way to do it, because first, you learn a lot from them. Two, you'll see if it's really for you or not. Entrepreneurship requires a lot of effort. I was telling my wife a couple of weeks ago, being an entrepreneur is like being an athlete. It requires so much physical and mental energy. You've got to be in good shape to run a business, right? And with the hours you've got to put in and the clarity that you need to have to run a business. And so it's taxing, right? And it's not for everybody from that end. Would I change that? No, as taxing as it is. It's enjoyable. But what I realize, it's not made for everybody because of those things, right?
Cool.
Well said.
Good.
Yeah.
I think but the last question that I will often ask is about the characteristics of an entrepreneur. So what would you point to in terms of three necessary or important characteristics of an entrepreneur?
I think one of the top ones that comes to mind, and it's something I'm trying to help my kids as much with it as possible, decision making. As an entrepreneur, you've got to make so many decisions every day, and some of them you don't have a lot of time to think about. So getting in the mode of good decision making is important, right? That's a big characteristic. I think perseverance, not giving up, especially when things don't go sideways, don't go your ways. And when you're a solo entrepreneur in your company, you don't have a partner. And there's pros and cons to both, but you really got to muster up that energy to, stand up, take the dust off your shoulders and back and keep going, right? And that, perseverance is important there. Third one, I think vision and innovation is important, right? To constantly create and see the opportunities and lead your team to, to see that same vision and innovate with them, or innovate for your company to take it to new places. So having that drive is important.
Cool. Very, very good. I have a question that kind of relates to your children. So if Eddie were here, he would ask a question along these lines. So your children are relatively young. They still have lots and lots of years ahead of them.
Yep.
What do you hope, given the kind of crazy situation that we're in today with the pandemic and economic issues and all the like, all of the bias and so forth that's going back and forth? What do you hope for them? Say 20 years from now.
What do I hope for them? I think at a fundamental level, I hope that by exposing them to through our travels, having the same experience that I did of having an open mind and understanding of how things work differently in different places and respecting that. I hope that I'm able to instill in them a lot of the lessons that I've learned as an entrepreneur, and the drive that it takes to make that happen. I don't expect that from them, but I do like to lay it out as an option on the table for them to consider, because I think they both have the capacity to do that if they want to. And really, I think at the end of the day, my wife and I both work hard on them is decision making. At the end of the day, whatever career they choose or entrepreneurship, being able to make good decisions. So walking through them, helping them see the decisions we make. Lately, they've both gotten hooked on the Shark Tank, so they see how people get pummeled on the show and they're not well prepared, don't have a good idea, and so the other part is just exposing them to know that, okay, here's what's important in life. So my daughter played volleyball freshman year in high school, but she didn't make the team the second year, right? And that was a big disappointment for her. But I let her know that, okay, succeeding in athletics is a very low probability. You got to be really superstar to do that.
Yeah.
So my only counsel to her is, okay, that didn't work. Focus on your studies, and then so you could be self-sufficient, right? And do well for yourself in life. So that was a hard question, Brian. I didn't think about it before, but thank you for it.
Usually in our introductions, we kind of have a few things that we normally do. So I might ask about business, and Manish about sales and marketing, Eric about IMCP, and it's Eddie that you have to watch out for.
That was definitely an Eddie question.
Cool. All righty.
Any other things that we answer for you?
A favor.
We have our usual closing questions.
Okay, yes, we can do that. All right, so let me see if I can double back to those closing questions.
And I'd
go
ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, there's some things that I think if it would be at all helpful on the technology side, I'm happy to share on that a lot of organizations don't consider that could be of value to them, but just wanted to share that because I know you guys can edit this, so sorry if I went off track here or off script.
Not at all. That's usually how it goes.
Okay.
And we're good with that. Alrighty. So as we kind of wind down our conversation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Before that, one question. So, Michael, interesting that you mentioned about 3 things, right? Decision making for entrepreneurs, perseverance, vision, and innovation. On decision making for your kids and entrepreneurs, any guidance you have or anything which tells you these are good way to make decisions, or this is kind of good direction to make decision? Because I'll iterate one thing. There was one time I read, and this is 5 years back actually. I was planning to move back to India, and very confused. I had a lot of confusion. And then I read somewhere that, when the options are very close, you will have confusion. And then both the options are pretty good. So go with anything with your confidence, and either one is good decision. And that's my way of making decision, to have a confirmation that, if it is a lot of confusion, then maybe both options are right. Any directions from your side on that?
Yeah. So 2 things have helped me with decision making. One is anytime I have to make a decision, I'll write down 2 or 3 options around that decision. Option 1, if I do this, option 2, option 3, right? To clarify, because I think what helps me with decision making is clarity. Oftentimes we get caught up in the details and we don't see the full picture. So getting more clarity helps making the decision making easier. So writing down the options around that decision helps me a lot. And a good friend of mine who is also a mentor, Mark Palmer, really helped me with some very simple framework that helps crystallize decision making, and that's looking at the upside and the downside of the decision. And I do that with my team all the time. What's the upside of doing this? What's the downside? If the upside is greater, well, go with the upside. If the downside is greater, then go with something else, right? And that has allowed me to navigate even difficult decisions in a very simple manner.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Where does no decision fit in there, Michael? What if I just do nothing?
Sometimes that is an option. That is one of the options. And well, I think if you were just to kind of break things down, sometimes we're presented with opportunities that we have to decide on, and they may look good on the surface. But sometimes a do nothing on those is actually better because it's a spending your energy in the wrong place. I'll tell you a good story that I heard recently, and I'm paraphrasing it because I heard it from someone else. It's almost could fit in the do nothing category, but I heard the story that Stephen King, when he was writing early on, was living in a trailer with his wife. And he received an offer from the local, I believe it was high school, to teach English. And they needed the money because they were living in a trailer and this was going to help them out. And his wife asked him, if you take that job, what's going to happen to your writing? And the answer was, as I understood it, was he wouldn't be able to devote much time to his writing because he's focused on the teaching. And her input was, don't take the job. Almost like a do nothing for that opportunity so he could focus on his writing, and look what it turned out to be. And that was a great story for me to hear and to keep in mind. Sometimes we have to tough it out a little bit more to fulfill our visions, and it's by do nothing on some opportunities that come our way that in some ways you can think of as a test of how dedicated and committed are you to what you're trying to do. Right, we're tested. And so those distractions, sometimes there's a no decision, not going to do it.
Okay, I will sometimes have discussions like this. So Manisha's example was to essentially go to India or not. Is that fair, Manish?
Yeah.
Every so often we have, and this speaks to Eric's question as well. We have decisions like that to make. Do we go with option A or option B? And what I will sometimes ask is there a third option? So do you have situations like that also, where perhaps people are a little bit tunnel vision, they only see two options? Does it help sometimes to ask if there's a third option?
Always. Absolutely. And I think a lot of times that third option then provides clarity, right? And I think that's where, as an entrepreneur, vision and innovation comes into play with the decision making. Is like, oh, well, what other option is there? And you got to really, not to use a cliche, but think outside the box from a different angle. What if we did it this way? Or what if we did that? And it helps make that decision easier usually.
Cool.
And that's a fun part
of
entrepreneurship.
But like you, I feel like decision making is a very important part of what we do. All right, then. How about we do this? What does an ideal partnership look like to you?
I think for me, an ideal partnership is one that has mutual respect and provides the opportunity to collaborate. We've partnered with other companies before where we've complemented what they do for their clients, or they've complemented what we do for our clients. And so ideal partnerships like that work really well. If we go down to a more tactical level rather than strategic like that, it's usually we've partnered with IT companies in the past quite a bit, where they're focused on infrastructure or systems that they install and support, and we've come in to be able to partner with them to support their clients on the product integration side or software side. For me, the whole digital transformation thing is about providing a company a competitive advantage through technology. And if a company is just using the same systems that their competitors are using, because those are the standard ones in the industry, they're only competing purely on their product or service offering. They're not competing on a technological offering from an IT perspective. So what I love coming in and saying, okay, well, your systems don't talk. Let's make them talk, so people aren't downloading from one and uploading to the other. You have to assemble reports from different things, right? Or your customers are not able to see their accounts and what's happening with your business. Let's build a portal, because your out-of-the-box system doesn't do that. So partnering with partners that provide those systems and some of the infrastructure are great partners for us, because then we can come in and make them look good by building all this extra additional software that gives their client a competitive advantage.
All right, great. Very good answer. If listeners are interested in learning more about what you're doing, how would they contact you?
So if they want to learn about Visus, they can go to our website, which is VisusLLC.com. You spell that V as in Victor, ISUS, LLC.com. Or they can find me, Michael Daoud, Daoud, on LinkedIn to connect with me directly through there. Or by email, michael@VisusLLC.com as well.
Thank you, Michael, for spending time with us today, and thank you for sharing your stories with us. That will do it for this episode of the True Stories in Tech podcast. I'm Brian Inuma with Strategic Systems Group, alongside my friends and colleagues Manish Bardia, President of Think AI Consulting, Eddie Bader, COO of Aegis Innovators, and Eric Klaus, CEO of PartnerSource Solutions. Thank you for listening. Please join us next time for more True Stories in Tech.
Thanks, Brian and team. We had a great time.